I think we have a few more thoughts really briefly for you all, just to share, to reflect on what you've shared with us today. But first, I just want to say thank you for all of you for staying with us throughout this long day. And I also want to thank all of our panelists and especially those who declined participation or decided not to participate. I think as Jillian pointed out earlier today, in light of these conversations about free speech versus hate speech versus more speech, the silences are often very telling and challenge us to think about who is in the room and who is not and why. So to bookend our day, we'd like to turn again to your voices and to the media that's at the heart of so much of this debate. But first, I'd like to just really briefly reflect on the process of curating today's discussion, and just offer up a few thoughts that are still lingering with me, even as we conclude this day of thoughtful discourse. So when Laura and Nicholas approached me about helping with this event last spring, long before Free Speech Week was a thing, or Free Speech Month, or Free Speech Year, we began not by thinking about what kind of conversation we wanted to have, but by surveying the broader landscape of discourse around free speech on college campuses and the history of free speech at Berkeley in particular. Looking at the media coverage of the last year and the past several years, several themes emerged, and these themes became our panels. We then realized that in order to dig more deeply into these questions, because they were so very broad, topics like the relationship between space and free speech, the history of free speech, the purposes of debate, and obviously the relationship to media, we would need to dig more deeply into the technology that is shaping the way this moment is quite different than any that have come before or since. And while we went through the logistical issues that are familiar to conference planning, whether that's securing a venue or choosing a hashtag or lining up speakers, we became increasingly aware of the weight of each decision. As our Spaces panel illuminated in its conversation earlier, to place something in the center of campus on Sproul Hall or in any venue is to claim a certain level of authority. It's to claim space. And to label our discussion as one on free speech, either online or on campus, is to claim an authority to speak on that term and also to reckon with the appropriation of that term, both within public discourse and specifically the way the term is being mobilized online. Finally, to curate a conference, again, is to claim, as we were critiqued for and engaged with the weight of claiming a certain layer of cultural accumulation. When you invite people to speak on a topic, when you reach out to people, whether that's faculty members or students, whether they be undergraduates or graduate students or staff members, you are setting the tone for a conversation, and you have to rectify and rationalize with what choices you make. And the reality is, I'm a curator and I believe in the power of organizing conversations around topics. I believe in the power of discourse, and I believe that there is power to actually having a conversation on free speech, to curating an event on free speech, whether or not everybody agrees that that's actually a thing you can do. So with that in mind, we're just going to briefly read some of the tweets that were shared with us today to end our conversation. So thank you, and Nicholas here is going to join me.
The title of this piece, which is also a tweet, is "Recordings are extracted from live events and deployed in different contexts."
We endeavor to include those who are afraid to speak here today as an essential part of the conversation.
The best way to learn, talk with someone that disagrees with you, but it's very hard, with ever-shrinking echo chambers, to find those people.
We need a zone of online privacy so that we feel safe in expressing our views online.
We have the right to our own private information and ability to opt out. Our private info is our property.
I disagree with Robert Reich that spending millions on security for alt-right events is an investment in capacity for dialogue.
There are many challenges of new media that we tend to put in the box of free speech.
Robert Reich is right that we need democratic deliberation, but is that what those who crowdsource violence are bringing to campuses?
A political movement is invested in violence and hate speech. Campuses need to be protected from disruptive, malicious forces.
Opening your mind so that you might be willing to be persuaded you are wrong, it's the other side of free speech.
A university is a place where eloquent listening is particularly important.
I believe in eloquent listening too, but are people who write post-hate speech on campuses doing eloquent speaking?
You are entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts.
When Milo stands up and says feminism is cancer, it's not a conversation. You can't out-troll the trolls.
The internet has shown us how other people think. This has been a huge disappointment.
There are no margins on the internet.
I notice that there's a real lack of hope in discussion after the 2016 election.
Free speech is not an end in and of itself. It's a practice by which we accomplish a larger goal.
If you have the right of free speech, you need to use it responsibly.
The internet creates a new set of challenges for intellectuals.
Public opinion is often shaped by information that lacks peer review. It is difficult to ensure legitimacy.
Nicole Rangel is killing it at Reply All. Focus on institutional support has gone to visiting speakers, not protecting, helping those who are doxxed.
Reminding us that as popular discussion centers around the right of conservative speakers, we must remember the rights of our silenced, vulnerable communities who are silently threatened for their own speech.
Bill Sharman of Bridge Alliance speaks on the algorithm of power and discourse in American politics. Two broad divisions of media pander either to a left-wing perspective of the world or a right-wing perspective of the world, which demonizes the other.
Free speech is something that I deeply and profoundly value.
Free speech and hate speech are disproportionately targeted to specific groups.
Clearly, an increase in online hate speech during Trump presidency shows research by Claudia von Bacano.
My personal favorite was when reps from the original 1964 free speech movement came out.
Keena Hazelwood Carter gave the best remarks at Reply All so far. Amazing, pointing to the importance of safe spaces, especially for minority students.
Sitting through the free speech in the age of social media panel at Reply All on Campus Hall and really learning about social progress.
Thoughtful emoji. Really appreciate how Reply All invited so many different speakers to talk about free speech in the digital age.
And it's dreadful that some, notably people of color, are too frightened to speak.
It's hard to have your campus turn into a circus or a theater.
Who's interested in political dialogue today?
We need peaceful protest, not deplatforming, silencing, or yelling. We lose the ability to have educated dialogue if we don't speak to each other.
Recordings are extracted from live events and deployed in different contexts. Thank you.
All right, everyone, we're done.